Hi everyone, this is the video for solving by factoring. So in order to solve by factoring, we have to have knowledge of the zero product property, which is this guy here, which says if A times B equals 0, then either A is 0 or B is 0, or both A and B are 0. So the zero product property basically just says if we have some value times some other value, and we know that it's equal to 0, then one of those things, either this question mark or this question mark, has to be equal to 0. Okay? So that's the idea behind the zero product property. So the way that this helps us is because if we can get it into factored form and we know that it's equal to 0, that means that either this is equal to 0 or this is equal to 0. We know one of those things has to be equal to 0. We don't necessarily know which one, so we're going to solve for both of them. So we know either x plus 4 has to be 0 or x minus 10 has to be 0. So then if we want to know what x is, we're going to say, okay, I'm going to solve for x here by subtracting 4 on both sides. So x is either -4 or I'm going to add 10 on both sides to get x by itself. X equals 10. So we know that our two solutions are x equals -4 or x equals 10, right? So those ones are like when you might remember just like switching the sign, but this is why, right? So you're solving to see if they're equal to 0. So we can do the same thing for these ones here. We could say, okay, 2x plus 5 must be equal to 0, or 4x minus 12 could be equal to 0. No, one of them has to be equal to 0 because it's the whole thing equals 0. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 5. 2x equals -5. Divide by 2. X equals -5 over 2, which doesn't reduce, so I'm going to leave it that way. Or I'm going to add 12 on both sides. Get 4x equals +12. Divide by 4. See that x equals 12 divided by 4, which is 3. There are two solutions here. These are my two solutions. Okay. So you can go ahead and pause the video here if you want to work on the first part of the assignment. It will just be solving like this. Go ahead and pause. If you're just going to take notes with us, we'll do some example problems here. So let's say I want to solve this equation here. There are 4 steps. I'm going to make sure it equals 0. I'm going to factor it using any of the methods. I am going to set the factor equal to 0, and I'm going to solve for the solution. So first step, make sure that it equals 0. It does, it equals 0. So everything is on one side. Great. My second step is to factor using GCF or the X factor or box. So GCF, there's nothing I can take out. This one doesn't have an X, and then there's no number, so I can't GCF. I'm going to try the X factor because I see that there are 3 terms, a trinomial. So I need numbers that multiply to get 5 and add to get 6. So multiply to get 5, that would be 1 and 5, 2 and a decimal, 3 and a decimal. Okay, so it must be 1 and 5. And 1 plus 5 equals 6. So no, those are my 2 numbers that are going to go into my factored form, x plus 1, x plus 5, and they equal to 0. And since they equal to 0, I know that one of them or both of them must be equal to 0. So I'm going to say, okay, x plus 1 must be equal to 0, or x plus 5 must be equal to 0, right? So I factored, I'm setting each factor equal to 0. That's what I'm doing right now. And then step 4 is to solve for the solution. So I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides equals -1, or x equals -5. So I have my 2 solutions here, which is great because I have x squared. So if I'm going to look at these steps, I'm going to make sure that it's equal to 0. That was step 1. Step 2 was to do the factoring and to put it into this format. Step 3 was to make sure that they were equal to 0. And then step 4 was to actually solve them. Okay, so those are going to be the same 4 steps this whole time. All right, let's look at example 2. We have our steps written here again, just in case you missed them. So first step, make sure it equals 0. So I see here that there's no equal 0. I see the x squared, so I want to move everything onto that side. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2x in order to move it onto this side. So this is going to become 0 equals. Those are not like terms because 1 is x squared and 1 is x. So I'm going to write x squared minus 2x. Right, so my first step was this portion here. My second step says factor using the GCF, the X, or the box. So GCF, I can see that there is something in common. There is an X in common. So I'm going to go ahead and take that X to the outside, and that will leave me with X minus 2, and that's going to be equal to 0. So I see that it's broken into its pieces. I used GCF, and that was step 2. All right, step 3, set each factor equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and set this one. This is a factor, one of the pieces, x equals 0. That one's easy, already done. Or x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, that was step 3, setting them equal to 0, each factor. And now I'm going to do step 4, solve for the solutions. So x equals 0 already solved. And then I'm going to go ahead and do plus 2. I get x equals 2. So my solutions are x equals 0 or x equals 2. Those are my two solutions. Okay. So example 1, we used the x factor. Example 2, we used the GCF. Let's look at example 3. So for example 3, I'll use these same steps. So step 1, make sure it equals to 0. So I see it doesn't equal 0. So I'm going to go ahead and set it equal to 0. I see x squared is over here, so I'm going to move everything to that side. I'm going to go ahead and add 6. So I'm adding 6 over here. That will cancel and leave me with equals 0. None of these are like terms. I have x squared, I have x, and then a number by itself. They're not like terms, so just write them next to each other. 2x squared plus 8x plus 6, just like that. All right, that was step 1. Make sure it equals to 0. Step 2, factor using GCF, X, or box. All right, so I'm going to see if there's a GCF. I see a GCF. I know that each of these numbers is divisible by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and take away that 2, divide out the 2 to the outside. That's going to leave me with x squared plus 4x plus 3. X squared plus 4x plus 3 still equal to 0. That is step 2. All right. Step 2, I still want to factor it using GCF. Now I can see, okay, so this is now a trinomial, right? So that means that I can use the x factor. I need to multiply to get 3 and add to get 4. So numbers that multiply to get 3, 1 times 3, that works. 1 plus 3 would be 4. So I'm still gonna have my 2 on the outside, and then I'm gonna break this portion into 2 pieces, x plus 1, x plus 3. All right. If you're struggling with factoring, go ahead and go back to the factoring video. You'll be fine. All right, so now I have it broken into all of my pieces. My third step, my purple step, set each factor equal to 0. All right, so I'm gonna say, okay, 2 is equal to 0. That's weird. I'm gonna think about that one up further. X plus 1 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. Okay. I know 2 does not equal 0. Right? 2 does not equal 0. So this is not a solution. Right. So if I have just a number by itself, I don't have to do anything with that because 2 does not equal 0. Here I have x plus 1 equals 0, and I'm going to do that last step, that orange step. It says solve for the solutions, right? So I'm going to go ahead and solve. So I know this one doesn't have a solution. Subtract 1 on both sides. X equals -1. Or subtract 3 on both sides. X equals -3. So I have those two solutions, and that is how I solve. So in this case, I had to do two parts of factoring. I did a GCF factor to make my problem a little easier, and then I did the X factor in order to break it down. I found this one is not a solution because it's just a number, a constant by itself, or a coefficient in this case. And then I solved for the other two to find my two solutions. Since it's x squared, I should always have two solutions. All right, guys, go ahead and ask me any questions that you have, and I will talk to you soon.